Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Matt Gagel. I am the Director of Programs at Montgomery History. Thank you so much for joining us for this special presentation in partnership with Glen Echo Park Partnership for Arts and Culture. Before we get started, I'm going to go over a few quick things. Those of you who are regular attenders to our history conversation programs know that we generally have programs on Tuesday, and next week is no different. Next week we'll be having a special Earth Day presentation with Steve Dryden on Rock Creek's Piney Branch, and it's the burial of that particular branch of Rock Creek. Should be a great program. I know you'll enjoy that. That'll be next Tuesday at 2 p.m. You can sign up for that program on our website at montgomeryhistory.org/mhconnected/watch. And again, I also just want to give a quick special thank you to all of those of you who have made donations or financial contributions to Montgomery History. We couldn't offer free programming like this without it, and we are extremely grateful. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A button. Those questions will come to me, and then at the end of the presentation, I will be reading through as many of those as we can get to as time allows with Barbara. So we'll address questions at the end of the program. If you're having technical issues, again, please use the Q&A, and I will get to those as soon as I can. That's all I have. With that, I'd like to introduce Katie Berner, who is the Executive Director of the Glen Echo Park.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you so much to Montgomery History for partnering with us on this great series of lectures about the Carousel, celebrating the 100-year anniversary. It's been really nice working with the whole team there, and we're so appreciative. As you said, I'm Katie Berner. I'm the Executive Director of the Glen Echo Park Partnership for Arts and Culture, which operates the programs at the park and maintains the site. We work closely together with our partners, Montgomery County and the National Park Service. It's a historic site, as everyone knows. It's also an arts programming site, as well as an incredible environmental asset that we have here in our community. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm very excited to see how popular these lectures have been. We also operate the carousel that we're talking about tonight and maintain the carousel, and frankly do it with the funds that are provided from various funders as well as the public. We always set aside funds to maintain everything, so it's great that we can hear more about the carousel's history tonight. You may have been to Glen Echo Park in the past, whether it was a long time ago or more recently, non-amusement park days, which the amusement park closed in '68, but we have a lot of arts going on there, great programs in our galleries. We produce festivals, social dances. This is all pre-pandemic, and slowly everything is coming back. Our artists are in place, and you can come visit us in our galleries as well, and starting to do some small in-person programming. But we're really thrilled that we've been able to launch a lot of virtual programming like this lecture. You can find out more at our website at glenechopark.org. I'd like to introduce my partner in crime who works with me all the time, raising money and doing wonderful things for the park, an incredible volunteer, our board president, Bonnie Casper.
Thank you, Katie. I'm happy to be here this evening to welcome all of you to this second lecture of our Carousel 100th Anniversary Lecture Series. We are so glad you are joining us tonight. This is so exciting. This wonderful celebration of the centennial of our beloved carousel, which is a Washington icon, would not be possible without the generous support from our sponsors. So I and we would like to thank them. We are so grateful to support from these major sponsors: the Maryland Heritage Areas Authority, the Maryland State Arts Council, the Heritage Montgomery Group, Geico, our major partners that Katie mentioned earlier, Montgomery County and the National Park Service, and our longtime supporter and sponsor, Carol Trawick. Thank you to all of you. I also want to mention how proud we are to have our carousel awarded the 2021 Heritage Award in the place category from the Maryland Traditions, which is the traditional arts program of the Maryland State Arts Council. We also need to raise donations from the public to help match our grant funding. And we hope that you will consider supporting the centennial celebration and help us preserve and operate the carousel so everyone can enjoy it for years to come. If you are able, sponsorship is a great way to create new memories with your family while helping to pay for the carousel tickets for those who might not otherwise be able to pay for them and enjoy it. You can find information about donating to the Carousel Turns 100 campaign at glenechopark.org/carousel100. A link will be posted in the chat. I now want to take you all back to Katie and to tonight's speaker. Thank you again for attending.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. And we couldn't do what we do without our great board of directors helping us out. I want to introduce our speaker tonight and mention that we hope you'll join us for the next lecture, which is July 14th. So we'll remind you before then, that seems a long way away right now, but that's going to be about our organ, the Wurlitzer band organ, and feature Durward Center, who is the genius who takes care of it for us. And we also have a lot of other activities. So again, visit our website. There's a lot of centennial activities. We are, number one, looking to open the carousel May 1st, and that is our plan with whatever social distancing is required. And we will be selling tickets online. So come to our website to find out more about that as well. But May 1st will be the opening of the carousel. Now I want to introduce Barbara Fahs to discuss Glen Echo's two great carousels, Coney Island versus Philadelphia style. Barbara is a museum exhibition design consultant by profession and historian of carousels by avocation. She first became interested in carousels when she rented a cheap apartment above the Santa Monica Pier merry-go-round. In 1971, she created the first photographic survey and census of American carousels. 2 years later, she was one of the founders of the National Carousel Association, who we've had the pleasure of working with and receiving grants from. Since then, she has written myriad articles about American carousels, including a cover story for Smithsonian Magazine, and she has given presentations for numerous conferences and organizations. So now I turn it over to Barbara. Welcome.
Thank you, Katie. It's really terrific to be here. And I'm going to just move on to the lecture if I can. And I'm sorry, share.
It's working. There you go. You got it.
Okay,
So.
Thank you guys. Before I start with the two great carousels, I think I need to give a little background. I mean, those people in Montgomery County know exactly, why isn't this?
Use so down in the bottom left corner, you can use the arrows. I believe that should work there for you.
Great.
There you go. Perfect.
Okay, so as I say, everybody around Montgomery County, I think, knows the basic history that this was a Chautauqua originally, or actually it was originally a real estate investment scheme. And the Baltzley brothers purchased over 500 acres overlooking the Potomac. And they chartered a railroad company to get people out. And then they got really interested in Chautauquas and thinking that would be a very good way to further develop their properties. So this is a plan. And if you look up here, this is the town of Glen Echo. A lot of it got developed. And this is the basic area of what is the park today and was the Chautauqua area then. And they opened in 1891, very successful first year. So everybody was thinking this is going to really work and be great. Well, the next year, there were rumors of malaria. The third year, the nation had a recession and things only went downhill. And not only are things going downhill in Chautauqua, but the railroad now goes all the way to Cabin John Bridge, to a competitor, and that becomes the terminus. So by 97, more, let's say, lower brow entertainment, vaudeville, boxing, light opera, etc., is replacing the more educational programs that they had sponsored earlier. And almost every year for the next few years, they will have different people, promoters, kind of trying to manage and keep it going. The Stone Tower, for those of you who don't know Glen Echo, that's a remnant of the elaborate stone enclave that was built by the Baltzley brothers for the Chautauqua. Well, the competition up the trolley line was Cabin John Bridge Hotel, and it was very elaborate, increasingly elaborate once the trolley got there. And it had excellent food and drink and a huge welty orchestrion up in this area. They also had musical performances. And despite Montgomery's prohibition laws for at least spirituous liquor, hard liquor that had gone in several decades earlier, they were known as a place that you could get pretty much almost anything to drink. So Glen Echo is, trying to compete with this. And I'm actually, before we go into the first merry-go-round, I found this newspaper ad for 1900. So while Cabin John Bridge Hotel has these fabulous meals and is really known, and the senators, the president, even ambassadors all go out there, Port Glen Echo was advertising no spirituous liquors, first-class cafe, fried chicken, and hot waffles, a specialty. So they're trying to compete, and they start then adding amusements. And in 1898, they add the first merry-go-round. And you can see the ad down here at the bottom, and they say it's one of the finest carousels in America. And it has the Mikado, and then, each week they'll have a new kind of light opera or entertainment. And it actually happens. I mean, sometimes the ads you see, but it may not happen. But the newspaper then reported, the Evening Star, that the merry-go-round did get underway yesterday, June 1. And it was patronized by crowds of delighted children and also the elders who just felt that they had to take a ride also. And probably Gustav Dentzel made the carousel. He's from Philadelphia. And it most certainly operated as a privilege, meaning that somebody brings in a ride and they pay a percentage to the location, to use the location, and whatever percentage is worked out. Dentzel also has a privilege not far away in Chesapeake Beach. And I believe there's records that, I haven't seen them, for an early Dentzel out at Cabin John Bridge Hotel. So he's in this area quite a lot. That early carousel may have looked like this one that was in Orange, Virginia till about 1975. It's a little two abreast. Or more like, and these are some details. I mean, they're really quite finely carved. I love the rooster. But more likely, it looks like this catalog cut from the late 90s. And all of the scenic decoration, you can see this is fabric, embroidered fabric, very typical German style. This is a 3 abreast. It has a nice big lion. And here's some of the animals that they're advertising in the same catalog. So they've got giraffes, they've got a nice mastiff dog, deer, goat. And as you know, in Glen Echo, you also have a giraffe and deer. So Dentzel becomes known for animals. This is the staff of the Dentzel factory in about the late 80s, early 90s. A couple of people I want to point out. The young man here is a precocious young man. He's a teenager, and he's Daniel Carl Mueller. This probably is his father here, and this is his brother, Alfred, we believe. Over on the right, this is Gustav Dentzel. And I think he's got his hand on this little boy. This may be Edward, a son. I always have called this picture the Take Your Sons to Work Day. Back here is Charles Leopold, who was probably the best carver of the period and probably is styling all of the Dentzel animals and horses. And he's got his son on Charles, who will also become a very good carver. And I would love to get more identified. This may be Mueller's father here. The father dies in 1890, and the Mueller boys, although they are teenagers, are really sort of left to watch out with Dentzel to take care of them. Well, up the way in 1903, Cabin John Bridge really ups the ante. And Dentzel puts in a scenic railway and puts in a huge, huge carousel. And it's, you know, described in the Washington Times. And again, it's not just an ad. It actually does happen. Richard Cook, actually, I forgot to give a thank you, Richard Cook. Nobody can do any work on Glen Echo history without thanking Richard Cook for all he's done. And he has a photograph showing this carousel. I'm going to take a break. A couple of other people I really need to thank is Debbie Lang, who's worked on the books about Glen Echo and the carousel, the restoration of the carousel. Roll Summit, who really knows Coney Island history of carousels, and particularly Illions. And Fred Dollinger, who is a guru on circuses, carnivals, carousels, band organs, kind of the go-to person that I call when I can't figure something out. So back to our basic story. So this is Cabin John Bridge. Here's the terminus of the railway. You'd walk across this bridge. You could go to the hotel. You could ride the scenic railway. You could ride the carousel. Now the carousel was a double-decker. It was quite fantastic. Dentzel was the only American who made double-deckers. The Germans were making them. And I've seen two different pictures of a Dentzel double-decker, and I don't know which one was at Cabin John Bridge, but it certainly looked very much like this. The boats do rock. There is a little bit of a rocking mechanism, but not a lot. And the carving is just fabulous. You look at this lace work, look at the manes, the deer, quite beautiful. And this style of horse is going to stay with Dentzel for a long time. Here's a little giraffe. And there's two band organs back here. And this was very typical. So there would be continuous music on any big carousel at this period until the double duplex tracker systems are added, and like is on the Glen Echo band organ tape. So now there's serious competition just up the trolley line. Also, in 1896, William Johnson brings a Frederick Savage big four abreast to Coney Island. It's got gallopers. They go up and down. It's made in King's Lynn, and this really becomes the standard that has to be met by other people. Johnson patents it, Mangels patents it. They both are signed by Goebel. I don't know the interrelationship between the two, but Mangels pretty much ends up controlling the system, and other makers have to pay him or devise workarounds. And this is what one of his early carousels looked like. This is probably his first one. It's certainly in his first catalog. And Mangels is a machinist. And so he's not a carver, he's making the mechanics. The fabulous Feltman is sort of the ultimate standard for carousels. It's finished in 1906. It was expanded upon. Back here are some little loof figures. It was a smaller carousel. And I think it took several years to carve all the figures and make it happen. And there's, again, several band organs back in here. In 1905, the newspaper announces that a Philadelphia capitalist has leased Glen Echo Park, and he's going to spend at least $200,000. This is, I think, the railway or the owners of the land, putting out a press release that may be overstating the situation. The capitalist at this is actually Lorenzo D. Shaw, and he had made his fame building the Channel Chute. It's this roller coaster, or really it's a downward gravity slide, around the Elephant Hotel at Coney Island that he also managed. And that burns in the late 90s. And in 1905, he's the manager of Willow Grove Park near Philadelphia. So that's the Philadelphia capitalist connection. He is an experienced rodman. So this is a change from management of the area of the park by promoters who are more show people. And they announced that they're reopening. And in September, he gets it open actually in late July of the next year, 1906. And in September, they announce that they now have a canyon dip that's going to be like a coaster. And they've got a Ferris wheel. Shaw's son, Walter, made Ferris wheels. And the carousel is the finest ever produced with all moving horses and 10 chariots. It's actually 10 chariot seats, probably. It certainly didn't have 10 chariots. But this is now the first of the two great carousels that I promised to talk about. The carousel was made by William Mangels and Company Carousel Works in Coney Island. The master carver is MC Illions. He's standing by the doorway by this wheel. These are probably carvers in the cleaner clothing, and these are probably machinists with a lot more grease on their clothing. This is the Glen Echo Carousel that comes in 1906. It's a large 3 abreast. It's, as far as I know, all jumpers. I think 48 jumping horses, maybe 2 stationary horses. There's probably back here on either side 2 chariots that we can't see, and they probably had a little horse next to them. It's got mirrors up here. It's got lights. It's going to have some real flash. One of the things about Coney Island carousels versus Philadelphia ones is at Coney Island, there are many, many carousels. Reportedly along Surf Avenue at one point, there were 11 carousels. So they really have to compete with each other with more and more flash, more and more style, you know, Feltman kind of setting the standard. Whereas Dentzel and Philadelphia Toboggan, also Philadelphia Maker, obviously, they are aiming more at individual parks where there isn't so much competition. So they don't tend to have as much of what I would call flash, as much gold leaf. If we look closely at these figures, they have these wonderful extended legs, you know, which I'm sure Illions is influenced by Mueller, and you can see these kind of legs sticking out in the Mueller illustrations. But this is also pretty highly unpractical on a carousel because people will tend to stand on the foot, climb on it that way. But these are quite lovely horses. The carousel, as I said earlier, almost certainly had chariots. This is a sister carousel to the Glen Echo one, very similar, has a couple of standing figures, but mostly jumpers. And it has these huge dragon chariots. You can see the chariot slightly bigger over here. They're really quite wonderful. Dragon chariots are also a Coney Island tradition that's gone on for decades. And this is a horse, not dissimilar, it's not jumping, but similar in head position, mane, and the trappings in the back to the one I pointed out previously. And Illions signs his name here. And he does that relatively often, more than most of the other carvers. This is another big Mangels carousel with large Illions figures, a lot now kind of more of a Philadelphia style. This is not common to have an outside row of figures, although it is easier to catch the brass ring if the outside row is stationary. This went in 1910. It's one of the last ones that Illions will do under contract to Mangels. I saw this before. It was broken up. This is this standing armor horse. And you can see just elaborate remnants still of silver leaf. Silver leaf and gold leaf, as I mentioned, are very typical Coney Island style. This is another one of the horses on that carousel. And then Illions announces that he will no longer cater to the frame maker, i.e. Mangels. Our product is the product of experience and can only be had coming direct. If you come direct to him, to us, to them. So he's in business now with his sons. And this is his card. And this is his workshop. This is MC Illions back here. This is his son Phil in the dark shirt. And this is his son Rudy in the front. Phil becomes quite a good carver. Rudy ultimately is more into the mechanics. This is another helper who does some carving. He also is the upholsterer. I don't know who this is. And no shop would be set up like this normally with these heads all over the place, legs all over the place. They're showing off. These are heads being formed. You can see they're blocks, and they're getting a little more carved here and then more fully formed here. So this is a very much a staged photograph with MC Illions in the center, other people kind of turning away or their heads down. He's the star, there's no question. This is a carousel, fantastic carousel. They upgrade the Stubman carousel that had been done with Mangels and put on these incredibly flaming mane horses, legs extended, I mean, very impractical. But on the other hand, if the carver is just up the street, you can get them repaired easily. If you're out at a park hundreds of miles away, this would be a big problem, but this is just amazing what Illions does. Meanwhile, MC Mueller, the precocious teenager who was at the Dentzel shop, he starts taking classes at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. The sculptor Charles Grafley is one of his professors. And he ultimately in 1902 leaves Dentzel and establishes his own shop with his brother Alfred. And he's really extremely talented. I can't imagine walking down a street in Philadelphia and seeing this in a window, but this is horses staged in their shop window. And this is quite wonderful. He's carved his business card and then photographed it. These are some of his sketches for a seahorse themed carousel. And this is a horse, a seahorse that was actually ultimately carved and was ultimately on a different carousel at Cognac Lake in Pennsylvania. This was a huge Mueller carousel, and I don't know where it ultimately was. We've never been able to figure it out. These devices at the ends of the crankshafts would have also turned and added more kind of flair. I'm very convinced that Illions and the other carvers in Coney Island are very aware of what the Philadelphia people are doing and vice versa. And that particularly, I suspect Mueller and Illions are sort of competing with each other and they're only 2 years apart in age. Mueller is 2 years older. And they are the stars of each of their communities in their respective cities. And also, meanwhile, Gustav Dentzel dies in 1909, and his son, William H. Dentzel, reopens the workshop. The figures are very much the same. And Dentzel says he doesn't believe in turning out work that is distasteful to the eye. I think he's referring to the Coney Island carvers. And the secret of their success is that all of our animals are lifelike in design, and the coloring is very, very natural. And this is certainly true for Dentzel. Here's some more of the figures. And by the early 1900s, Salvatore Cernigliaro, known as Czerny, has joined the Dentzel shop. And he has always claimed responsibility for the animals, particularly the cat, the rabbit, the little piggy. There's a bear that he also does, the ostriches. And this is a new group of animals that's added in the early 1900s. And he'll continue with W.H. Dentzel. The basic style of a Dentzel carousel doesn't change a lot when William H. Dentzel takes over. What's happening here that is interesting is that to avoid the Mangels patent and also not to have to build a pit underneath, they have a step up. So the jumping figures are above this step up. This was installed new in 1915. The scenery is quite plain. It's all painted. And there's just a few light bulbs. But by the end of the teens, Dentzel is obviously searching for a new style, and he really wants to make a mark in the big park market, which has been pretty much taken over by Philadelphia Toboggan. Also by the late teens, one of the makers I haven't talked about much, Charles Loof, who was based in Riverside, Rhode Island, and then moves to California, has been building amusement parks and very big carousels. He dies in 1918. Also, with World War I, there's a lot of problem getting supplies. Illions has a hard time selling carousels. They actually make one and try and take it on the road and make money. And some of the carvers and all from the different shops have to work elsewhere during the war. So after the war, though, Dentzel wants to take on the park market and try to compete clearly with Philadelphia Toboggan. Don't know exactly where this carousel ultimately was. I've heard Atlantic City, but I haven't been able to confirm that. Dentzel did always have a carousel in Atlantic City, and it was a place that he would show off carousels, make very elaborate ones for there. But this clearly has flash. I mean, you've got all these little hanging crystals, you've got mirrors, but the same figures, they're not changing. Everything is up in the upper scenery. This is another unique one he makes. Again, obviously trying to figure out what can he do to capture the park market with higher priced product. So there's mirrors here all in the center. And if you look carefully, look at these jester heads. For people who know Glen Echo, this will look very familiar. Again, I think this is made 1919, maybe 1920. I'm just not sure. Meanwhile, back at Glen Echo, if we go back to 1911, the Washington Railway and Electric Company now controls the land, all of Glen Echo, and not the community, but the park part. And they form the Glen Echo Park Company with Leonard D. Schloss as vice president and general manager. And Schloss announces that there'll be no finer amusement park anywhere. And Schloss is an experienced parkman. He's been working for the Ingersoll people, they're the coaster people, and has several other parks he's managing initially, including Luna Park, which was in Alexandria until 1917 when it had a serious fire. Schloss will lead Glen Echo from 1911 to 1949, and he's also becomes an important fixture in the whole National Association of Amusement Park People. And this picture is from when he was president of the association in the early 1940s. And he promises he's going to bring in something new every year. And he brings in different things, but by 1921, he wants to change out the carousel, and he announces that the 3 new features for the 21 season will be the latest type of Dentzel carousel and a new building that is specially constructed for it, and that's the building that it still is in. A thrilling new coaster dips and a new modern ballroom. I do see ballrooms announced multiple years. Dancing is clearly a major factor. The ballroom that you know and love today will come in a couple of years. And this is the announcement picture of the carousel in Glen Echo today when it arrived in 1921. And the Washington Herald says it's agleam with lights and glittering in all its trimmings of bronze, gold, and silver leaf. And it was a prime favorite for everybody who goes to the opening of the park. It now has a lot more lights than any of the previous carousels. You can see them all around the mirrors. It's got mirrors here, mirrors down below on the inner scenery. A lot of the same animals still, they're not changing particularly, but this is a very, very showy carousel in the style of Art Nouveau that's very, very popular. And Dentzel uses the Glen Echo Carousel to advertise. I believe the Glen Echo Carousel is the first one of this model that is made. He puts out postcards up in the upper left of the carousel, and actually the lower right is the same postcard found in the files of Hein, the major German maker. The bottom's been cut off. I don't know if they're going to use it to say they can make this style. And it shows up in Billboard in an advertisement also in 1921. I apologize for the reproduction, but during COVID, it's quite impossible to get into libraries and get better material. And thank you to, again, Richard Cook for sharing this postcard, which I would love to own, but I don't. So it's Glen, and probably at every meeting of park people, Dentzel is taking photographs of this, the photograph of this carousel and using it for advertisement. The carousel was built in the workshops in Germantown, Pennsylvania. Mueller has closed his own shop in 1917. They really had a hard time keeping going. And he is now back carving again for Dentzel and also doing design. So this is Mueller with one of his large drawings, full-scale drawing, thinking about a new horse design. This is Mueller carving horse heads. He's primarily a designer and carving the heads. So taking kind of setting the style. This head that you see on the bench at the left part of the picture is very similar to two horse heads on the Glen Echo Carousel. Jeremy is still at Dentzel and he's still carving animals. He's working on an ostrich and also a cat with a fish in the mouth. I think all the ones at Glen Echo are birds. And he also then assembles the horses, putting the head on a boxed up body, legs probably carved by somebody else. And he will carve all the decorative trappings and the body and make it all come together. In the paint shop, here we have some lions lined up. And in the far left here, this is Angelo Casamilia. He's the foreman of the paint shop, and he's worked for both Dentzels. And he also is a scenery artist, so he's doing a lot of the painting on the scenery. And if you look at this lion and this little detail, this is the Glen Echo lion, and that's the little monkey detail. And so we can date this series of pictures to either late 1920 or early, more likely early 1921, just before, as the figures are getting ready to be shipped and the lion is in the paint shop. It's a marvelous series of pictures. And the carousel is just so beautiful. People obviously love to show it off and take pictures. I'm quite convinced this is Schloss on the right. This is just a little bit later, about 1925. And one of the new things that Schloss will add in 26 is the Wurlitzer 165 organ that is still at Glen Echo today. So what happened to the Illions? Well, the Illions was taken in on trade. Schloss paid $11,000 plus the Illions Carousel to Dentzel. Schloss also had to buy the carousel from the Washington Railway and Electric Company, which had bought it from Shaw, who owned it, in 1910 when Shaw left the park. And Dentzel was well known for, let's say, recycling, repurposing carousel figures. And because the Dentzel company lasts so long, over 2 generations, they often were taking in old stationary machines and sending out new jumping machines. So in 1922, a carousel, a Dentzel Carousel, opens north of San Francisco, and by 25, it had moved to the San Francisco Zoo. It's got all Dentzel figures on the outside, but the inner row are jumpers. The second row jumpers are outer row figures from Glen Echo. So this horse up here, the woman sitting side saddle, this horse is now in San Francisco by 1922, or north of San Francisco, and on a whole new carousel. And there's a few more. This beautiful horse with the legs sticking out is also on that carousel, but Dentzel has gotten smart and recarved the leg, so it's been pulled underneath and less likely to break. Back here, this figure is this one here with a Dentzel bat saddle. That's not something Dentzel would ever do. It's an Illions style, kind of flamboyant idea to have a bat saddle. And again, this figure is here. The dragon chariots, however, do not go to San Francisco. There are 2 dragon chariots on a Dentzel carousel that was made in 1923 for Coney Park in Reading. And that carousel is now at Fair Park in Dallas. And I believe that these are the chariots that once were at Glen Echo. And of course, the Glen Echo Carousel is still in Glen Echo for everybody to enjoy. And it survives because of the unbelievable effort of Nancy Long and others in 1969, and especially in 1 month in April of 1970 to purchase it after it had not only been sold once, but sold twice. It never left its building. And it thrives today thanks to the loving care of the Glen Echo Park Partnership and the National Park Service. And thank you to everyone who takes care of this carousel. And thank you for participating. And if anybody wants to reach me, here is my email. Thank you, Katie, and everybody for inviting me to give this talk.
All right. Thank you so much, Barbara. That's a fantastic presentation. We have gotten quite a few questions that have come in, so we'll go ahead and jump right into that. And then, of course, as can be seen there on the screen, there's your contact information. If for some reason I'm not able to get to a question, or you have more detailed questions, you can certainly reach out to Barbara. First question I have here is, what is an orchestrion?
Orchestrion? Well, I'm going to tell you to ask Durwood Center when he does his talk in July. It is a huge mechanical musical instrument. I think I'll stop share.
Okay.
And should I be back large?
You are back on the screen large, yes.
Okay, I'm not seeing myself.
Okay. Well, I can see you, so you're there.
That's fine. It's a fantastically, the absolute top end of mechanical musical instruments, and it was made in Germany. And has so many bells and whistles, it's supposed to sound like a full orchestra. And Durwood Center uses an email Welty boy. He's absolutely devoted to Welty. So ask him more about it, please.
Okay, a little bit of a teaser there for the next presentation. Next question I've gotten a couple times is, did all carousels run clockwise, counterclockwise? Was there any particular standard?
Okay, the American ones almost always run counterclockwise. So your right arm is outside to catch rings. American carousels had rings from the very beginning. I mean, the first carousel we know of in 1799 in Salem, Massachusetts had rings. It's, I think, coming from the French. The British have never been into rings. And so English carousels run clockwise with the idea, be sure I've got this right, that you can get on correctly on the left side of the horse.
Okay, and a kind of a follow-up question to that. Someone asks, what does that mean to catch rings? So I'm assuming they didn't see the original one of our previous presentations. So can you explain the ring concept?
Yeah. If you go to Glen Echo now, and I hope someday Glen Echo will be able to have rings again, like some other parks do, there's a little stand and it has an arm on it. And once the carousel would start going, typically a young boy would move the arm out and put a series of iron rings into the arm. And then among that would be one brass one. And as you went by, you would catch it with your finger. And if you got the brass one, or sometimes it's called the gold one, then you would get a free ride. And it comes a little bit from the idea of jousting. And in the 19th century, some carousel horses were actually had a little slot in their shoulder, and there would be a little spear in that little slot that you could take out and that you could use to catch rings. You can still catch rings up at Watch Hill, Rhode Island, at Crescent Park, just outside of Providence, Rhode Island, and at Martha's Vineyard, and the nearest one, Knoebels Grove, up in Pennsylvania. It's really great, so try it.
Okay. Richard Cook says he is verifying that the man before the carousel is in fact Leonard Schloss. So
great, thank you.
We have answered that question. All right, thank you, Richard. Let's see here. Let's go back up to the top. How long did it take to manufacture a complete carousel, and did the owners have any say in how they were designed?
Well, I think by price, certainly the owner would, if you look at the catalogs, there's usually a less expensive one and a more expensive one. So money is certainly going to make a difference. There certainly are stories of owners going to the shop. I think when they had extra time, they would carve figures and there would be figures around and people might choose figures. I know Rosa, who's going to talk about restoration in August, has said that she believes some of the figures, I think the lion is one of them, not the lion, the tiger is one of them, are earlier Dentzel figures that might have been recycled. So I think the owners certainly, might even say, I can spend this kind of money. The speculation on why the dragon chariots don't go to San Francisco is that is a less expensive carousel put together of older parts in many places. And the dragon chariots go out on a more expensive carousel, a top-end carousel to Casonia Park in Reading.
Okay, and I have gotten a couple of questions about if there will be a recording of this presentation available. The answer is yes, it will be available. My hope is to get it up by tomorrow afternoon, and I'm sure I'll run into some technical difficulties, but because that's what happens. But that'll be available at Montgomery History's website as well as the Glen Echo Park website. On Montgomery History's website, it'll be at montgomeryhistory.org/mhconnected/watch. And then Glen Echo will be glenechopark.org/carousel100. That's carousel 100. And I'll have that'll be in the Q&A answers for people to see as well. Let's see here. Someone asks, were all the animals made of wood?
Yes,
Okay.
in that period. I mean,
in
you
that
start getting aluminum figures coming on carousels. First partial ones, maybe the head and the legs, in the late 1920s. And by after World War II, they're virtually all aluminum and now fiberglass.
Okay. So I may have missed it, but I'm going to ask this question because I think it's very important, or at least could be a very interesting answer. What would the general price range for the creation of a carousel be?
Well, the Glen Echo one, as I said, the Schloss paid $11,000 cash, and the Illions. I don't have a price list from, that would actually give the prices at that time. Back the earlier one, the Shaw one, my guess would be more in the $5,000 range. This is the Illions.
Okay. Someone asks if there is a museum that is dedicated to Dentzel's carousels or other carousels.
There's several museums now. One of them is the New England Carousel Museum. They're very active. They're in Bristol, Connecticut, I'm quite sure. And they're very worthwhile visit. Then up in North Tonawanda, New York is the Alan Herschel Factory Museum, and that's actually in the factory for the Alan Herschel Company. In Sandusky, in an old post office, is another carousel museum just outside of Cedar Point. And if you go to Cedar Point, you can ride 2 wonderful carousels and also a racing derby. There is a C.W. Parker Museum in Leavenworth, Kansas. And out in Albany, Oregon, they have carved a new carousel. Carving carousels today is gotten very popular in communities, community carved carousels. And their carousel is on an old Dentzel frame. And the Dentzel family donated the frame, and also some of the Dentzel family archives are also there. The Dentzel family, as it turns out, is a 5-generation carousel family. Gustav's father, Michael, made at least a couple of carousels in Germany and toured them. And William H. Dentzel didn't have any children, but his brother Edward's son, William H. Dentzel II, who was our first president of the National Carousel Association, took up carving, and his son, William H. Dentzel III, who's up in Washington State, makes small carousels. They're very interesting, and many of them are solar powered and so on.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's a great answer. And again, there's just a lot of questions, and I'm going to get to as many as I can. But if we do miss them, Barbara, can you give your email address there again? If you could just put it audibly, read it, and then I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. B. Charles. So that's Barbara B. Charles, like the man's name, at Staples, Staples, like the store, AND spelled out, and then Charles again, CHARLES.com. And I'm happy to try to answer as many questions as people will put up with.
Okay. And I've just sent that through in the chat, so that should be visible to everybody there. And again, if you're not able to find that and you would like to get in touch with her, you can certainly reach out to me. My email is mgagel@montgomeryhistory.org. Okay, moving right along here. Are there material differences between the mechanicals of the various types of carousels? Is there anything innovative about Dentzel's models? It's a 2-part question there.
I can't really answer that, but Todd, come here.
Oh, bringing in some backup here.
Todd Goins is the person. He's here staying with me because he was just working on the Glen Echo Carousel. So come here.
Yes.
Come close.
All right.
Todd didn't expect to speak. The question is there a difference in the mechanics between different makers and any special mechanical innovations, let's say, for Dentzel?
Well, even year to year, there was a lot of differences in them, from the earlier ones to the later ones, as well as manufacturers from Philadelphia to Baldwin to Dentzel. They all had their own individual pieces and parts. And you know, so there was a lot of difference, just as much difference in as there was in the animals there are in the mechanisms.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm trying to see if there's any other technical questions before we let you go.
I will say sometimes down at the park or for special events, you can see inside, and it's really fascinating to look inside the housing and see how it mechanically all runs.
I would definitely agree with that. I did get a peek into the Glen Echo Carousel inner workings, and it is quite the visual treat. Let me put it that way.
It's all balanced off the top of the pole.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Were there any dangers to riding a carousel?
Well, you could fall off trying to catch a ring, I suppose. I certainly have sprained my finger doing it. There are much earlier stories. In 1834, the first race riots in Philadelphia were over a carousel. Started at a carousel that was located on a dividing line between the Black and white communities. I just read about a murder in Washington, D.C., again, 19th century, relative to a carousel. But really a carousel is pretty calm, but you can't play around on it. You shouldn't be climbing up on the horses. I mean, the operator should keep people under control pretty well, and I think most of them do.
Okay. Someone asks, I assumed that the carousel today has the same animals as they did in 1921. But I thought you said some of the horses went to San Francisco. Can you explain?
Okay. Sorry if I slurped over that a little bit. The 1906 carousel, the Mangels Illions carousel that L.D. Shaw brings in, that carousel goes in trade to Dentzel in 1921. So Schloss pays $11,000 plus the old Mangels Illions carousel for the new carousel. So that means now Illions has in his shop all of the figures that were on the earlier Glen Echo carousel. And when Dentzel then has an order for a less expensive ride for San Francisco the next year, he puts a lot of those figures on that carousel. And that's how those parts that once were at Glen Echo are now on other carousels. Everything that came in 1921 to Glen Echo on the big Dentzel that you see today is original and arrived in 1921. So all those animals are now 100 years old.
Okay, and we are getting close. It's 8:30 now. So I'm going to ask Barbara. I have one more question for you, and then I do have a question for Katie if she is near her computer at this moment. If she can get ready to answer a question about Glen Echo Park. And now I have to find. Here it is. Okay. Someone says, as I recall, the wildness of the horses increased as carousels became considered more much tamer than other rides, while early Victorian carousels went out of their way to depict horses as being tame with closed mouths and calm expressions because the speed of the rides was considered scary. Is this true? Do you have any comments about that?
Well, the 19th century rides, an awful lot of them are what's called flying horses, true flying horses, that they're hanging on chains off the sweeps. And as the carousel goes around, the horses literally fly out. And you can see that in Watch Hill, Rhode Island. And those early figures, like Watch Hill, are very similar to what would be on a rocking horse. I think, you know, even if you look at some of the very late 19th century, 1890s figures, they're getting, the Coney Island ones and Loof in particular are getting, let's say, more aggressive, if you want to put it that way. And then certainly by the turn of the century to 1910, particularly the Coney Island ones are very aggressive figures. So I think it's more a scale of the carousel. And also, and once you have electricity, the rides can be much bigger. I don't know that at all that it's related to competing with roller coasters. That's not something I've heard, if that's the implication of the question.
Okay. I'm gonna jump in because there was a question that came up that I think you might be able to answer. When do carousels start becoming electrified? Is there a certain time when that suddenly kind of exploded in popularity?
I think the magic date is 1887, that the first trolley, electrified railway trolley, interurban, you know, city trolley, goes in Richmond. And almost all the trolley companies quite quickly realize that they've got workers using the trolley during the week, but on the weekends, if they want to get a lot more patronage, they can put in a park at the end of the trolley line or somewhere along the trolley line because they've got the electric power. And so from that point forward, any of the parks that are related to a trolley line can have electricity and can get bigger and bigger. Certainly places like Coney Island already have electricity. And then as, you know, electricity comes to other areas, then the park can have it, even if they don't have a trolley line.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. I know there's a lot of other questions, and I apologize that I've not been able to get to all of them. We don't want to keep everybody here, and especially Barbara here all night. Again, if you'd like to further contact her, you can click on the chat button, and her email address is there. Katie, I see that you've joined us again. This is of course a very tricky question. A lot of limitations, but someone asks, how do we get tickets to ride the carousel? Does Glen Echo Park have a plan in place, or have you guys begun thinking about plans for when we are allowed to reopen, how that will work for visitors to come see the carousel?
Yes, we are going to have limited ridership, and there will be, either 25% or 50% of the seats normally available. And we are going to be selling tickets online. So we have not opened that up yet, but we'll do so before the end of May, and they will be timed tickets. And this is really only for this season. So they're just going to work a little differently this year. You'll actually have a 2-hour block of time, and you can ride several times within that block of time, because we'll have cleaning procedures and we'll have just a much smaller number of riders per ride. But we are going to go ahead and put those up online in the next few weeks. And again, if you visit our website, glenechopark.org/carousel100, that will be where we post the ticket sales. We also, if tickets are still available, you'll still be able to walk up and buy them when the carousel's operating. So, and we'll put the operating hours up as well. The primary hours are on the weekend, and then there are also some weekday hours. So we want you guys to experience it, and there should be plenty of tickets for everybody. We are raising money by selling these carousel cutouts and that you see at the ball games, where people occupy a seat, a cutout occupies a seat. So some of the unoccupied seats will have these carousel cutouts. That is also a fundraising campaign. But anyway, there should be plenty of tickets, and we hope everybody can come. And we just don't have it up yet, but we are in the process of putting it up, and we will be following whatever Montgomery County's guidelines are and working closely with them.
Okay, thank you so much, Katie. Sorry for putting you on the spot there, but I know
no.
a lot of people are excited to get back to the
Of course.
carousel. I know I've never ridden it, as I'm relatively new to Montgomery County, so I will be keeping an eye out for those tickets because
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to that. Okay, Barbara, I'm going to jump back to you. Any
Okay.
last closing thoughts before we wrap things up here? I do want to say thank you so much for your presentation. I know everyone really enjoyed it, but is there anything you forgot to mention or that you'd love to say right before we close?
Well, support Glen Echo. I mean, ride the carousel, support it, keep it going. I mean, we want to have those horses and jumping up and down and carrying on for another 100 years. And as you go around the country, visit other carousels. And I'm going to put in a pitch for the National Carousel Association. If you go to carousels.org, there's a census, and so you can figure out in advance where the carousels are. But Glen Echo is your local one. Support it.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Barbara. And thank you to Glen Echo Park. This has been such a fantastic partnership. There's such a great history there. Again, we'll be back in July with the next presentation. And those of you who registered for tonight's program, you will also get a notification about that. But again, check out the Glen Echo Park website, and I'm going to forget the address, glenechopark.org/carousel100, carousel 100. With that, again, thank you, Barbara, and we'll see you all next time. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Bye.